The government called it a rescue. Survivors called it a massacre. What happened during the 51 days at Waco would leave dozens dead and America asking who lit the first spark. Everyone remembers the day when David Koresh stood beneath the sun-bleached wood of Mount Carmel, preaching that the end was near. What followed would become one of the most controversial and tragic standoffs in modern American history. For 51 days, a religious community, armed federal agents, and an anxious nation watched events unfold outside Waco, Texas. And when it was over, dozens of people were dead. A compound lay in ashes, and questions remained that still divide Americans more than 3 decades later. David Koresh, born Vernon Wayne Howell, had risen to lead a religious sect known as the Branch Davidians. At their compound, called Mount Carmel, followers believed he possessed unique insight into biblical prophecy and the approaching end times. To supporters, he was a spiritual leader. To critics, he was a dangerous cult figure exercising extraordinary control over his followers. By early 1993, federal authorities suspected that weapons were being illegally modified and stored inside the compound. On February 28th, agents from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms moved in to execute a search warrant. What was intended to be a law enforcement operation quickly descended into chaos. Gunfire erupted. When the shooting stopped, 4 federal agents were dead, many others were wounded, and the Branch Davidians had retreated behind the compound's walls. The failed raid shocked the country. Soon, the FBI assumed control of the operation. What followed was a tense 51-day siege. Negotiators worked around the clock, speaking directly with Koresh and attempting to convince members of the group to leave peacefully. Some did, many stayed. Inside the compound were men, women, and children. Outside stood armored vehicles, tactical teams, and a government determined to bring the standoff to an end. As the days passed, frustration grew, negotiations stalled, promises were made and withdrawn. Each side accused the other of bad faith. The longer the siege continued, the more uncertain its outcome became. Then came April 19th, 1993. Before sunrise, the FBI launched its final operation. Armored vehicles began breaching sections of the compound. Tear gas was introduced into the building in an effort to force occupants outside. Officials insisted the operation was designed to avoid bloodshed. Instead, it ended in disaster. Hours later, smoke appeared. Then, flames. Within minutes, the fire spread rapidly through the wooden structures of Mount Carmel. Television viewers across the nation watched in disbelief as the compound burned. By the time the fire was extinguished, 76 people were dead. Among them were men, women, children, and David Koresh himself. But the tragedy did not end with the fire. Almost immediately, a fierce debate erupted over what had happened that day. Survivors and critics argued that government tactics had contributed to the disaster. They questioned the use of armored vehicles, the decision to launch the final assault, and whether opportunities for a peaceful resolution had been abandoned too soon. Federal investigators reached a different conclusion. Multiple inquiries found no evidence that agents intentionally started the fire. However, investigators also criticized aspects of both the initial raid and the final operation, identifying mistakes in planning, communication, and judgment. The result was a tragedy with no simple explanation. A story shaped by fear, conviction, miscalculation, and the consequences of decisions made under extraordinary pressure. The legacy of Waco would extend far beyond Texas. The siege became a symbol for anti-government movements and was later cited by Timothy McVeigh as a motivating factor behind the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995. Even today, documentaries, historians, journalists, and former participants continue to examine the evidence. They study recordings, reports, photographs, and testimony, searching for answers that remain frustratingly incomplete. What happened at Waco was not a clear victory for anyone. It was a collision between a determined government and a deeply committed religious community. And in that collision, dozens of lives were lost. More than 30 years later, the images remain haunting. The burning compound, the desperate final hours, the lingering questions. Because sometimes history's deepest wounds are not the ones we cannot explain. They are the ones we think we understand, yet never fully do.